It was around 12:30 at night when I stumbled home. I hadn't really drunk, although most people of my age probably would have. My friends and I aren't really drinkers, which I kind of like. We prefer to do board gaming while listening to some tunes of some independent artists we had just discovered that week. This was one of those weeks. The night was as silent as any other this summer. Ordinarily, no car and no drunkies were to be heard in this rural area at night, but this particular season, the nights were very still. Normally, there was at least a small wind coursing through the streets, rustling leaves on the way, but it looked like even this quiet sound was absent. The only thing I heard were my footsteps and my rhythmic breathing. The first thing I noticed about my house was that the lights were on. This was not odd. My dad never really slept with the lights out. The odd thing was that the lights were on in our garden shed, where the tools and bikes were. I bet Dad forgot to put it out after he got himself a bottle of wine. Now he was a drinker, and he was drinking a lot in the past few weeks. Before I tell you what happened when I stepped into our house, I must tell you something about Dad. He had always worked as a clerk in some hardware shop in the city, ever since I could remember. He's been one sad man, constantly depressed, constantly drunkenly telling me how much he loved me, and whenever I caught him alone, he was crying. This had of course increased after Mom died in a car accident, and a year after, the disappearance of Eddie, my little brother. We were the only two left in our family of four, and he constantly helped me remember that. I didn't think he had any hope that Eddie would ever return, and I hated him for that. Every time either my mother or Eddie was being brought up by either of us, he would tell me how much he loved me, that he would do anything to protect me, that he would never ever leave my side. It was drunken speech. I never took him seriously. But above all, there was one emotion I felt strongest when thinking about my dad. Only one thought that was constantly stopping me from hitting him, kicking him, screaming against him. Pity. When I entered the house, I noticed Dad wasn't in the living room. The TV was on and the sheets were on the floor, joined by a couple of fallen bottles of beer. I thought he was in the bathroom for a piss, but there was no response when I called for him. Something wasn't quite right here, I thought. The thought that he might have died occurred very quickly. I was constantly worried about that man, so this wasn't uncommon. I thought to investigate the shed and turn the lights out over there just so I can hit the bed. When I opened the barn door, it didn't take me long to see what had happened. Just beside a web of bicycles and above a fallen stool was my dad, hanging. He was perfectly still, like a delicate twig, not a breeze of wind to break his face. His face was pointed upwards, looking at the ceiling. I wasn't surprised, weirdly enough, to see him dead. I had always been prepared for that moment. The eerie thing that made my heart sink most was that he was so still, so stiff. It didn't look like Dad at all. It was like an inanimate copy of Dad. A doll, almost. It didn't look human. But it was Dad. I knew it was. He must have been hanging from that rope for hours. That poor fucking man. I didn't move for a couple of moments. I didn't know what to do. I should call the police, I thought. Let this nightmare be over with. Just get him out of the shed. Just fucking bury the old sod. Finally, his life of melancholy and despair had come to an end. He deserves it. It might seem funny that I felt almost this relaxed, and somehow I felt guilty for it. But, as I said before, I had always foreseen this coming. The sight might have been eerie at the moment, but I did feel sad and sorry and shocked in a horror kind of way, but I think my pragmatism made me feel kind of relieved. Before I turned around to walk to my house, my eye caught something on a small table right next to the door. It was an envelope reading. Andy. It was my father's handwriting. That was easy to recognize. I thought of opening the envelope before calling the police, but then I thought I should call first. Ultimately, I decided to open the envelope and read the contents before calling anyone. This needed to be the last moment I was with Dad. It just felt good to do it that way. Inside the envelope, I found a letter of a few pages long. I looked at Dad one more time. The only thing I could see of his face were his nostrils and his chin. Perfectly still. I looked at the letter. I noticed that the handwriting started to become kind of shaky halfway through the first page, but then again, he was a drunk. I started reading.
Andy, sorry you have to see me like this, son. I hope you understand why I had to do this. I hope I didn't make you jump. The last thing I wanted to do is scare you. I love you. God, I love you. I thought of shooting myself in the head, but getting a gun is harder than it seems. Besides, it would make such a mess. I absolutely don't want you to see your old man's brain scrambled across the floor. Now there's pills. I could have done pills, but it wouldn't have guaranteed me death. And I wanted to die. I so wanted to die. You could never believe how much God you would never believe. Now, I never liked life. You probably knew that. Mommy died when you were young. You two were sitting in that car, remember? And then she died. And you didn't. And I have always been grateful for that. I hope some things will become clear by this letter. There were some things I kept from you, and I thought you ought to know. Now these things are a part of the reason why I needed to leave. I hope you will forgive me for each of these things. I understand if you hate me forever, but you need to know. You just have to. But don't you ever forget, son, that I loved you. You were everything to me. Everything! The night before Mommy died, I had a dream. In that dream, you and Mommy died in that car accident. Both of you. Not just Mommy. When I woke up, Mommy was gone, taking you to Aunt Nellie for the weekend. But someone was talking in my head. He asked me a question. He asked me, who must survive the accident? I was awake and the dream was still haunting me. I thought it wasn't real, just a dream, so I answered, Andy. Because I loved you. And you're my son. I know Mommy would have done the same. It was around that time the accident happened. It killed Mommy, but you were completely spared. All you did was cry, but you were alive, buddy. The night of the funeral, when you and your brother were lying in bed with me, I had another dream. It was the same voice from before. He said I should do what he said. Or he would take you to hell and torture you forever, like he did with many other children. I couldn't speak with him, but I just had to do what he said, buddy. Please understand I had to do these things. He was real and powerful. He never told what he was. I think he was the devil. I think I made a deal with the devil. But I had to do it because you are so special. And I don't want you to be tormented for eternity for my own mistakes. A few months later, you and your brother were still sleeping in my bed, and I had a dream. Do you remember the rabbit I gave you after the funeral? I think you called him Thumper. Like that rabbit from Bambi. You know, the white one with the black spots. The voice said I had to bake it and feed it to you. The next night, I told you boys that the rabbit had escaped. But in reality, I twisted its neck while you were at school and prepared it in the shed. I had no love for the thing, but I remember you two were horrified to learn that it disappeared. I would never forgive myself for that. Those eyes of the rabbit haunted me forever as I committed that atrocity. Please forgive me, buddy. I had to do it. I can still remember you liked it as well. You were crying for that fleeing rabbit, but you loved the meat. Forgive me, God. Forgive me.
I had to stop reading for a second. I began to feel dizzy from reading. And of course, I still remembered that moment. The moment that Dad was crying while we were eating. I always thought he was just crying over my mom, but it just began to make so much more sense. But then, I began to feel utter disgust from my father. I couldn't look at him. I wasn't really angry at him for doing what he did, but a voice? It was all just too weird. I had to know more. There were still a couple of pages left, so I continued reading.
The voice left me alone for a few weeks. By then, I was terrified by it. I was constantly afraid it would appear in my dreams again. You told me you were confident enough to sleep on your own again. I persuaded you two to stay in my bed because I was so afraid. That very night when I almost lost you from my bed, he talked to me again and he said I had to do something horrible. It was so evil, and I could hardly do it, and I even have a hard time telling you now. But that thing reminded me that he would torment you for an eternity, tens, thousands of years if I did not do what he said I should do. So I had to do it. Please forgive me. You see, he said I had to dig up Mommy and feed a part of it to you. Although the meat would be rotting, there would still be a chunk or two left. I knew that whole thing was true, and he was a monster and the devil, and that I had to do it. I dug her up at night when you two were asleep. No one would ever notice this happened because the graveyard here is barely visited, and the church here is practically abandoned. I dug up and opened the coffin, and I saw her again. I could hardly recognize her, but some of her features were still there, like her long blonde hair and parts of her eyes, which looked like broken china. I remember that her skin was horrifyingly blighted, as if there was an ocean of water underneath her feeble skin. There were insects everywhere in her body. Maggots, ants, beetles fucking swarming everywhere on her body, eating whatever was left of her. I brought a kitchen knife and pulled her arm up and did the deed. When I cut off a portion of her flesh from her arm, I saw that there were tons of maggots in her flesh and under her skin, falling from the flesh on her body. The stink was fucking disgusting. I could barely prevent myself from vomiting, so I took the flesh and
I couldn't stop myself anymore. I quickly reached for a bucket somewhere in the shed and started puking as never before. I also started crying. I didn't dare to read any further, and I was absolutely terrified to look at my father again. After a couple of seconds, in which I managed to regain courage to read on, I took the letter and continued reading.
I could barely prevent myself from vomiting, so I took the flesh and closed the coffin and managed to climb out and bury it all again. It took me around 4 hours, and it was pure hell, buddy. I did it because I loved you, and I did not want you to suffer. You must understand this. Please understand. I went home and started drinking, and I'm sorry for that. Beer and whiskey were the only things that distracted me from what I had done. It was the only thing that helped me go to sleep, and it did. When you got home from school the following day, you woke me up from the couch, and ever since then I couldn't sleep in my bed anymore. I was so afraid of him. He would never ever leave me alone. So I drank so I could sleep. And when you woke me up, I started picking the rotting flesh. Very, very well. It was very tender, you said. I only fed it to you and fed your brother chicken. I read somewhere that human meat tastes like chicken, so I thought this was the fairest thing I could do. Either way, you said you didn't like it. You even said the chicken might be spoiled, and you were right, my boy. But it wasn't chicken. I fed you your fucking mother. Until this very day, there is not a minute when I do not think about that. But I had to do it. I had to save you from him. The voice didn't bother me for a couple of years. There was a bit of worry when the news said that a gravedigger could have been active at the local graveyard, but after a week or two, it was concluded that there might have been an invasion of moles. Thank God that there actually was an invasion of moles a month later. Even though I did not hear from the voice for years, I was still afraid of it every day, because I knew it would contact me again, and he would demand something from me that would be even more disgusting than feeding you mommy. And yes, a few years after I did that, the voice contacted me again in my dreams, and he asked something of me. And I was right. He first reminded me that he was looking forward to slaughtering you over and over again. He said fucking terrifying things that I'm not going to share with you, my son. And that's when he demanded. That's when he demanded me to kill your younger brother and feed a piece of him to you. I stopped reading. I did the job in the bucket again. I knew what was coming next. I knew at the moment he said he actually dug up my mom to do what he did. Eddie. All the pieces fell together. Why he never seemed hopeful. Why he never wanted to talk about him. I knew what that bastard was going to do next. And still, I could not look at that hanging sack of shit. And I still couldn't stop reading. I had to continue. I killed him, buddy. I rode him to a forest far, far away, and I strangled him with the cord. He struggled for a minute, kicking the dashboard cabinet over and over and over and over. And I think I heard him whisper, "Dad, please." But it sounded muffled. You know why I killed him? He would just die. He would just become a lifeless object. He would perhaps go to heaven and see mommy and live happily. If I didn't kill him, then I would just be sending you to hell. Do you understand? I had to do it. God, I loved him, Andy. Every time I see him in front of me, fucking smiling and being happy. He was a good kid. He was a smart kid. He was only 10 years old. I'm trembling so much as I'm writing this, son. I feel so sorry. I killed my own son, Andy. I did it all to keep him away from you. I cut off his earlobe and put it in a plastic bag. Then I buried him in the forest. I wanted to kill myself right then and there. But if I did, I was afraid he would still take you and torture you. I was at peace with the thought that I was only alive to prevent him from taking you. It was my only motivation for living. That, and alcohol, sadly. That evening, I baked you the loaf together with some chicken, and I went to the living room and I couldn't eat for days. I couldn't watch you eat it. I just started drinking and drinking and drinking so much. I was drunk every hour. I just wanted to die so much. But I was trapped to protect you. The police are still investigating the disappearance of your brother, so I think this letter should wrap things up. Just tell them what happened and that Dad is very sorry. A few months later, which is to say tonight, I got a dream again. It was him, and he gave me another task. I couldn't do it anymore. I was never really sure if suicide would free me and you from these shackles I forged for myself, but I guess there's only one way to find out, bud. I'm sorry if this does not free you, and I'm sorry if you go to hell or something. The last task is just too much. I can't do it. My life ends here. My son, I wish you the very best. Please forgive me for everything I have done. Understand that I did this all to help you, because you were my entire life. I was a slave of a demon which I could not persuade to stop from contacting me. He is too great and powerful. The last thing I have to say to you is to tell you why I committed suicide. It was that task, you see. It was too much. In a fraction of a second after I dreamt that dream, I chose the easy way out and ran to the shed and killed myself. I wrote you a quick note and I thought that would probably be the end of the matter. But I was a fucking fool. He's too powerful. I actually thought I could end my life without telling you. I actually thought I could end my life without letting you know what had happened. Without telling you exactly why I killed myself. And without telling you the specific details of me killing Eddie and digging up Mommy. He made me write it. Worst of all, I didn't even know that I did everything I had done for nothing. Me committing suicide breaks the deal. Andy, I wish you the best. Lots of love. Daddy.
6 a.m. The police came and retrieved Dad's body. Nobody found the letter, for I immediately hid it in my pocket. I am with my aunt now, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. I cannot believe that bastard story. It just can't be real. Yet, I am not sleeping. I'm afraid. What will happen to me when I sleep? I gotta sleep sometime. And right now, the stillness of the night persuades me to sleep. And I can't give in. Man, I really enjoyed reading this story for you guys. But if you guys like stories like these, I'd appreciate it if you would shank that subscribe button, and if you could also like and share it with your friends as well. That would mean so much to this channel. And if you have any suggestions of what kind of story I could do next, I would like to hear it in the comments below, please. I'm open. Well guys, until the next story. See you then.